gosh, there's so many different things that you just said there. And I lost my father a little over 2 years ago, Parkinson's, the last really 7 years, but the last few years, just very difficult. And in terms of, I bet we could do a podcast. Maybe I may try to twist your arm. I definitely at some point want to talk to you about your sales. We could do a whole podcast just around your experience with the commercial, the commercial side in doing sales. And, my 12 years in corporate America, that would probably be really fun. But in terms of, and where it's being identified, I mean, family practice, like they're being stretched. They have to see so many patients, and there's only so many resources. There's only so much time. And you talked about how important that clinical development was. Almost 20% of stage 3 clinical trials on the pharma side fail. And look at the data around it, 70% is due to clinical efficacy, making the endpoints on the trial too complex, teams that don't work well together, data that is, you spent all this money and the data is not telling you anything. And so I could see how, what you said, how important that is in terms of the chief medical officer, the value that they bring to the table there.
And also now when you mentioned the trials that fail, a constant finding, or at least one of the learnings that I have, I think that I have the pleasure or so lucky to work with an amazing clinical trialist, and she told me that a clinical study should answer one question. If you want a clinical study to answer 2, 3, 4, 5 questions, then you are making that study extremely complex, and the chances of failure are exponential.
Right.
And this is a kind of common practice, and is understandably, when you have little resources, you want to do one thing to address 20 aspects, but it will not. It will fail. So that's why it's important those studies to really prioritize. So it's important to not only understand we have those clinical studies, you have that data, but what additional data points you can have and showcase. We have a call center at Insightec. The patients are calling just to learn what is that ultrasound, and there were thousands of interactions there, and no one in more than 10 years, well, not 10 years, since 2016, 9 years or 8 years, because we did it in 2024. No one had looked at it, at that. No one. And it was so rich to show to payers how long it takes a patient to be diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
In this country, it takes 17 years on average.
Wow.
To be diagnosed with essential tremor. Patients are shaking. They don't know what's going on. And in many cases, they get, you're lucky it's not Parkinson. That's all, and they are wondering what's going on. They need to justify themselves in public if they cannot drink, that they look maybe, drunk or something, that are shaking or they are nervous. And then it can take 20 years taking different drugs for the very little percentage of those who have been offered a treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Until they said, you know what, there are potential additional, solutions for that. But what I want, I don't want to make it about essential tremor, is in general, those interactions with patients that were calling to find out what this was the solution, there is a gold mine as well. So any data is valuable data. It depends how you look at it and how you analyze it, because it can be extremely informative.
I loved when you said that earlier. That was one of the things that really, that when they're like, hey, is this publishable? Yes, this should be published. And it's like you're collecting data. You got to look at the data, and if you're not looking at the data, and in this day and age, you're not looking at you're not outcomes and analytics driven to create real best practices. I don't know how you compete in the age of the metaverse. And there's so much that can be learned from that data. You look at, design history files on the medtech side. Most of the warning letters, because that design history file was done once and then it's put in a drawer and wasn't really looked at. It should be a little document that you're learning and continually improving your quality management system, and that's obviously one piece of it. So that's super smart. I think I could talk to you just about Parkinson's for a long time. We had no idea what was going on with my dad for a long time, and even the idea that I've heard and read scenarios with Parkinson's is really almost like some consider it like type 3 diabetes. Leading up to that, that's a whole nother. We don't have enough time for that conversation. But if you were talking to a CEO, a startup that had moved past seed funding and they're growing, or a mid cap, and they're like, we need to have this role, but we're not really sure where to put this person and how to look at it, what would be your advice to an executive or an executive team on how they should start out considering the scope and responsibilities for a newly created CMO position?
I would say to that CEO that definitely to keep growing the organization and the business and to give a future, right, is you need a co-pilot. And it's not someone that it will be doing things completely different, but it is someone that will help you to arrive at the same place, maybe by making sure, other aspects of the organization, maybe taking a different path, but pushing towards the right direction. And that role, it will help to put the flavor of the story behind that financial number that they want to achieve. You want to achieve X number of patients treated. Okay, I will help you to tell how we have been transforming life of that many patients, and I will help you to tell you how we did it and what aspects were meaningful and what was the social economical impact, on changing those or treating those patients. This is what the CMO office will help. And I said the CMO office will help you also on expanding beyond that, because you don't want to just get the approval. As we were mentioned earlier, you want that to be reimbursed. You want that to be in treatment guidelines. Who will be having those discussions with person in charge of treatment guidelines across different geographies? Is the CMO or the CMO office that will be able to do that. So it expand the future of possibilities for the company. This is why you need to have a CMO.
Obviously, it has to be safe, effective, and it has to be cost effective in terms of producing it. And if it's not going to make any money, then obviously it's not going to be on the market very long. But I always look at everything relevant to where investment money is going for career opportunities, because that's where growth is most likely obviously going to occur. But patient outcomes, patient access, and then how does it create efficiency in the healthcare system, because it saves dollars that can be spent elsewhere. And when you have all three of those, and then you got a right culture around that product, then you've really got gold. You've got an opportunity to make a significant impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So 100%. And it's what, we were mentioning before, everything that is the real world evidence, everything that is the collaboration with patient association, what is meaningful for them, everything that is on discussing with payers for proper market access, all that discussion, 100% is our bread and butter.
So we touched on this a little bit, but I want to get so when I've worked on medical affairs and looking at the CMO role, starting to work on those types of positions, that level position. When the first medical affairs position I worked on was a director position, and it was like, in terms of recruitment and attraction, it was like, okay, you've got very few people in the role, and then a lot of people that would like to be in the role. There was a real gap between those that could do the job and then that whole risk piece. And the client, the partner that I had at the time, that company we've helped 67 people go to over 4 years, but there was they had to be in the role. So I think it's very similar, medical director, chief medical, at varying degrees, but how do you get that first opportunity? And maybe speak to how you made the transition, what was interesting about it to you. And our goal is to help people obviously with their career path, and why I do the podcast and webinars, just bring value to the marketplace. And hopefully people see things and they're like, hey, maybe they can help us solve our problem too. But maybe please speak to that in terms of what made you want to do it and how you made the adjustment.
Yeah. So full disclosure and being completely transparent, I joined the pharma industry just by chance. But it was not my intention.
Okay.
My intention at that moment was to go back to France. I was practicing in Argentina, doing both academic and my private practice. And we wanted to go back to France as a family now, because I did my residence in France, went back to Argentina.
Where'd you live at in France? Sorry.
In France, in Strasbourg. In Strasbourg. In the Northeast, is a beautiful city.
Yeah.
Close to Germany on the Rhine River. Is a very rich cultural area of France, and we had an amazing time living there. So when I did my residency there, our firstborn, she was born in Strasbourg, and then we went to Argentina. In Argentina, we got the other two kids, and then we wanted to go back to France.
Okay.
It was one of my friends, that former, colleagues at residency, that he told me, hey, you know what? You have done so many work for pharma. Maybe it will be easier to find a job in pharma. And so like this, you are going to be back in France, and then you are going to have time to find the right hospital where to work. So fantastic. Okay. Help me to make sure my letter is in the proper French. And here I sent a letter. That was April 2002. I was in France at that moment just for a congress. I was invited by the equivalent of the American Academy of Neurology, but the French version, the Journée de Neurologie de l'Homme Française. They invited me to present there. So I went back then with the CVs printed, it was not electronic like nowadays. And my friend helped me to write a letter to 5 pharma companies. And I sent that letter by mail to 5 pharma companies in France, and 2 reached out to me. And then in June, I was in France passing interviews with Johnson & Johnson. Janssen Cilag, the pharma company of Johnson & Johnson. And this is how I entered working at the end of that year. I was there in pharma. So my intention initially was, is until I found a job at a hospital. And I found out that in medical practice, you're always helping one patient at a time, right? And here as a physician, I was able to do so many things. First, that eventually you can impact a lot of patients at the time if you do the proper medical education or scientific communication or the right study design. But also I found out that as a physician, I was able to do so many things in pharma, that certainly medical affairs, but medical affairs, as I told you, is communication, education, the clinical trial of phase 4 design, interaction with physicians, but also interaction with marketing, interaction with regulatory, interaction with sales, internal training. Well, suddenly, when you do your studies, you do medical school, then neurology, then epileptology, and then I find out that wow, I can see the whole forest again, and I was able to do so many things that I fall in love. I fall in love with the job, and yeah, I was supposed to be there a month or a year, and yeah, and I stayed for more than 20 years.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We got cut off there, a little technical issue, but we jump right back in. So we were talking about the. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of re-ask you this question. You were talking when we got cut off, and I was like, no, because the answer was so awesome. But when you look at again the amount of data that is being collected in large scale EMR and wearable technologies and mobile applications and the patient experience, I think it's going to be really interesting to see over the next 5 years in certain clinical areas how the patient starts driving what their experience looks like instead of just accepting. I think a great example is type 2 diabetes. And I know people that have been diabetic and lost weight and now they don't. But in the past, it was like, okay, you're diabetic and now you're going to be on insulin. And it was the pumps. And then it's these applications. So you don't have to stick yourself and you can monitor it. And it's like, wait a minute, like this is reversible. I don't have to live with this. So it's interesting how patients, I think it's going to be in terms of driving things, but how do you see the CMO role changing? I don't think I asking the question as good as maybe I did before, but having the talent understand business, as we talked about how important that is, and making sure that different sections are communicating around risk and how you share the value prop, what matters to the physician, but then also knowing the science, the medical, and now you've got this IT cybersecurity aspect. So the role is going to keep evolving. It's going to keep growing. And I think it's going to be vitally important to get the right hire because the cost of mishire can be huge for this level. So you were telling how you see, in the next 5 years or so, the role evolving and how maybe the executives should look at it.
Yeah. So yes, I'm sorry for the technology glitch. I don't know I think it was on my side. I don't know. But in any case, yes, I think the technology will help tremendously and is helping tremendously today. I think that regulators component, it will take longer. I don't see FDA, for instance, really start embracing massively across therapeutic areas data from wearables or EMR in order to grant approvals, But yes, we can see from now on that from right now the value that it has for payers, and I can say from right now the value that it has to inform decision making within the organization. So it needs to be someone that is the CMO, someone that really embraces technology, and someone that use any aspect of the technology that can help to guide or assess a direction that we are taking on. If you have a technology averse person, really that person will play in a huge disadvantage. But I think it's not necessarily only for CMO or medical affairs. It's across the organization. It really is. And that's why when I was mentioning before, that is not a basketball game, that is a soccer game. What I mean by that is that In a basketball game, you can have one, two players, very good, that can catch the ball at the end of the court and run the whole court and score, right? In soccer, you cannot do that. In soccer, you need a good defense, midfield, uh, and and forwards in order to really play the game. And you need to have an amazing goalkeeper as well. I'm from Argentina, man. And if it was not for the goalkeeper, Emiliano Martinez, we have lost the final cup.
Right.
In in healthcare is the same thing. And what it glues now and why it's more than ever important to play that type of game, the soccer game. What I mean by that is we have all functions working together in an integrated fashion. And the common tool across that is technology and how I'm using data for market access, how I'm using data for assess patient benefits, how am I using data to talk to patient associations, how am I using data that I can really use for scientific publications and others for market assessment or market penetration. So I think technology today is democratized across the organization and across society,
Hmm.
and you need people who are able to embrace it and use, get the most out of it.
I think that's really smart. I love sports analogies. I've played basketball in small college basketball, and certainly the more players you have, if the team, there's more in soccer or football, so the complexity of how your strategies open up, right? Like in basketball, typically you have two or three people that are doing most of the scoring, and
Mm.
so the strategies are different. But how you use information and take your successes and extrapolate those, and but then learn from the failures of the data that so that you continue to make best practices. You're analyzing, look at those outcomes, and you're making tweaks. And I don't think that you can look at anything. Uh, Certain micro situations can maybe not be easily duplicated, but you can't look at macro and without looking at micro.
Hmm.
From a business
Absolutely.
point, from an outcome standpoint, and hopefully we're going to move in a direction where reimbursement and outcomes of the patient continue to become more and more, this is just my personal hope, tied together versus being paid for activities.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I look at it relevant to talent resumes. You see a resume that's task oriented versus results oriented. Gosh, let's, having a system where we get paid because we actually bring results versus doing a task that maybe it's a band-aid instead of actually what's maybe the best.
Well, when I'm getting candidates that I interview for different roles that we have in the organization, today arrives to me the two final candidates, right? The team have already done the screening, but I'm usually, when you look at those resumes that say responsible of this is responsible of that is responsible of that.
Right.
I say, listen, two people with the same responsibility will have the same resume. I'm interested in you. What have you been able to do with such responsibility? What are the key achievements? What are the things that you're particularly proud that because you, I don't know, Maria, Jonathan, whatever, you were there, boom, I was able to do A, B, C, D, absolutely. 100%.
If somebody knows nothing about history and they're got this resume and the person was the captain of this huge ship called the Titanic, like that sounds amazing, but how do if you don't know it went down, right? So
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it's great that you ran the bakery, but how efficient were you at bringing in ingredients, cost effective, and running it and making it actually profitable, right? So
Mhm.
I think
Absolutely.
that's certainly well stated and said. In so as we finish up here, what is what would be your advice? Um, Again, we talked earlier about the talent, the people that have actually done it, and there's a pretty big gap. And somebody that maybe's been a medical director for a long time and they have been involved in different cross-functional areas and then move to their first chief medical officer role, or a lot of times you see somebody that's really well renowned in their clinical area as a physician, and then they move into that role. What would you say? I'll let you answer it however you want, and if you want to do both, but from what executives should look at in terms of being open to talent, to somebody that maybe hasn't been in the role yet. And then I know that varies versus on the size of the company. If you're a $40 billion company and you're bringing somebody in for a particular area and they're going to be over that, there's probably less risk in that versus if you're a $50 million company, 200, you get my point. And then what to physicians that want to get into industry, anything you want to share there in terms of being open to talent or positioning the talent positioning themselves for opportunities?
Yes, I think that how I take it, right? I'm really taking the time to know the person that is applying for the role. That's why I'm pushing, even if they write a CV, if the CV lists the scope of responsibilities that we were saying that is not ideal.
Right.
I take the time to really understand what were the things that they achieved, they are proud of achieving, because proud of have achieved, because this is really telling a lot on the people that you see what the people values and what the person has been able to do. Because when you understand that, you can see eventually how that person eventually, not only can integrate with the rest of the team that is already in place, but also what will be the key contribution that that person can bring to the table. So I'm less inclined to look at that perfect resume on having checking all the boxes on all the positions that have been through. I'm looking more at the person, and particularly maybe if you are in a smaller team, if you bring someone that yes has been that great pilot, but that knows how to fly, having all those sensors, all those parameters at hand, all the data, and then you ask them to fly kind of blinded in a very small aircraft. I wonder how much comfortable that person will be. So
Right.
that's why I'm also, of course, I'm taking into consideration the company I'm in, the team that I'm managing, and what is the role that I want, and take, as I said, the time to really know the person. I would say that for me, it is is the key, the number one you know asset or characteristic, because you can teach how to do things.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot teach ambition, eagerness for success, orientation to detail, being fair play. Those things you cannot teach. I can teach on many others how to build a medical plan, how to build a publication plan or congress strategy, how to design a study. I can teach on that,
Right.
right? But not in all the rest. So that's why I think it's important to get to know the person.
That's exactly why what you just described, why I started the process of creating Top Talent Accelerant. Because, I mean, you look at leadership IQ, so many, obviously, more companies fail than succeed. 40% of startups don't make it 2 years. Half of those that do are gone at year 5, and 80% don't make it 10 years. And there's a lot of different studies and data, but leadership IQ, lots of companies, industries, a lot of data showed that for what was deemed a mishire, that only 11% was because they didn't actually have the skill that they were hired for. Ultimately, 89% of the data showed low emotional intelligence. They were not coachable. They had poor temperament, so they didn't play well in the sandbox with their toys, and they weren't motivated. Like, so how important is it that they have the emotional intelligence and they like people and the product, and their personal why matches with the company mission and vision? Because to your point, you can teach certain skill sets. And obviously, when you're looking at the education, anybody that's in the CMO role or medical director role, those roles that report into it, has a lot of education. They have proven they know how to learn and apply. So the personal traits around emotional intelligence and what they're interested in is really important.
It is. It is. I know. Also, I use another expression that I will not say it here, but I will try to make it more PG-13. That is, I prefer, hold back, wild people saying not that fast, hold on, than kick back to others, say, do it. Have you done it? Have you done it? Do it. So I prefer to grab those crazy people that are
pulling the reins a little bit instead of
exactly
give them a hot poker to win
exactly
and move to action.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you get people that are passionate and they're trying to drive forward, but they're able to step back and take direction, and they're trying to look at their problem solving. And then as you tweak that, because you're going to find more solutions and more areas to bring value. It has
Absolutely.
people that have that kind of excitement. So, well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, how much I appreciate your time. And thank you so much for being willing to share and come on.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you very much for having me. It was a real pleasure. Thank you very much.